thank you very much for joining us and the City Forum today in our second virtual catch-up. We spoke last week, but I think the war's moved on a little bit since we spoke last week. But we'll start with the kind of the usual questions and kind of some of your thoughts. So, I think insurance has very recently come under quite a lot of negative press. There are a lot of people out there who are stirring up against insurance. During this crisis, what do you think we have done right, and what do you think we could have done better as an industry in whole?
The trouble is, there's very difficult to come out with much good news from it. I mean, all of the things that we do really well tend to be things that are just not newsworthy at all. You know, the things that we're doing really well, keeping clients closely informed, helping them with downsizing their operations, helping get return premiums from insurers, helping to get them payment holidays for their finance houses, advising them on how to get back to work and how to get back into the offices safely, doing risk assessments for them, all of that stuff. You can't write a headline about any of that, but you can certainly write a headline about weasel insurers dodging their responsibilities and refusing to pay claims. And yeah, 'twas ever thus, but a couple of insurers have obviously accidentally shot themselves in both feet. And unfortunately, with the way they've then responded, they're then continuing to do their kneecaps as well, just for the sake of good order. It's really difficult. I feel for them. I mean, what they probably should have done and still could do, and the ABI should have done a better job of, I think, is actually getting that basic understanding across that insurance was never supposed to pay out for global pandemics. It kind of, there is a reason why nuclear war was always excluded from policies. There's a reason why biological contamination and so on is excluded. And the same exclusions should have applied to global pandemics, but one hadn't happened since 1918. So I think the surprising thing in a way is that actually, it's now coming out that it was on the National Risk Register, and that there should have been awareness of this as an exposure, and nobody did anything about it. Obviously, it's easy with hindsight, but that lack of understanding amongst the general public, people. I've had clients I considered to be reasonably bright individuals who built up businesses just say, well, what are the insurance companies paying? And then when you point out that what you're effectively saying is, can the insurance industry basically stomach paying the entire gross domestic product of the UK? Well, patently, there's no way on earth the insurance industry could withstand that. And the situation they're in is just an accidental exposure, but it's coming out in the press as being not so much an accidental exposure. It's coming out as insurers weaseling out of responsibilities, which is really unfortunate.
Yes, I think intent was never there, but some fortunate bad wordings have left some exposure, which probably should have been kind of cleared up.
The funny thing is, from an intent point of view, though, it's quite funny. I think of any underwriters in the forum will remember the number of times brokers have come to you and said, "Yeah, look, I know it's not technically covered, but look, we all intended to cover it, didn't we?" And then the other said, I don't read it in the policy wording anywhere." And now, of course, the shoe's on the other foot, where the client's saying, "Well, it's in the policy wording."
A question which has just come to me, Peter, is: does this mean we haven't really seen a hard market for 20 years?
Yeah.
We are looking. The market is getting harder. Had broking got sloppy? Had broking got lazy in the 20 years? And I feel sorry for the young guys who've come in the last 5-10 years in insurance, because they probably picked up bad habits. Does this kind of go back to the fact that we probably need to get better as brokers and probably underwriters? Understanding.
Do you mean that have brokers got lazy, or have underwriters got sloppy with the wording?
No. This is broking. This is
okay.
This is, have brokers got lazy in understanding risk and transfer and preparing presentations for insurers, and have insurers got lazy in accepting poor presentations?
I think that there are loads of answers to that question, Richard, because of course over the same period, we've gone from producing manual documents effectively to completely describe a client's risk, which we then faxed, posted, emailed to underwriters into a whole world of electronic placement. And I think there's been loads of upsides to electronic placement, but one of the significant downsides is that you're constrained by the question set. And a lot of the systems, in order to balance quotability with speed and efficiency, they've accepted incomplete question sets. So they'll put a question set up on an EDI platform. A broker will do the best of his, to the best of his ability, answer those questions, but it's often incomplete. And then the underwriter, in the interest of quotability, will accept that incomplete information and issue a policy. So I think it's whether it's laziness or whether it's just trying to get stuff done in a reasonably time efficient manner. That combination of trying to get stuff done quickly, working around electronic systems, and then trying to convey all that information to underwriters, something's definitely been lost along the way, because previously, a broker would have had to actually understand everything about a client, because they had to complete a proper full-on presentation in order to get the risk placed. You now don't often have to complete all that information. Is that a fault of brokers or underwriters? It's probably a bit of both. Underwriters are wanting to try and write business and trying to get deals done. Brokers are trying to get more done with fewer staff and trying to work around their systems. And between the two, there's definitely been a drop-off in data quality, I would say.
I find that many underwriters following that EDI process are now relying on a statement of fact, which is really bland document. It's kind of pushing responsibility back to the customer, which I feel tends to go against the Insurance Act 2015 in many ways. The next big challenge, of course, is that there's a big thrust amongst customers to try and think, well, actually, can I save even more money by not using a broker at all and just going online and trying to solve a problem? And there are countless insurtechs that are trying to set up solutions to enable customers to deal direct. And I see that as being a huge risk factor for those clients, because in the absence of advice, customers, with the best will in the world, are not going to understand what they're buying, and insurance companies are not going to be able to find a way of helping clients to understand what they're buying. And we're setting ourselves up for a really big reputational crisis, I think, maybe not now, but when companies start being able to place SME insurance direct themselves, I think we are setting ourselves up for a bit of a crisis there.
Peter, sorry, Richard, to jump in. I'm not sure the protocol's here, whether I can or not, but I just wanted to follow up on that question, because it's interesting, because we've been debating that within Aviva as well. And our sense, and as you know, I'm on the intermediary side of the business, don't have any direct business, but Aviva does in the personal line side. But certainly in the SME, we feel a hard market, a recession, the actual positive, if there is one anywhere, in the BI scenario and clients facing things that they felt they were covered for and they weren't, whether we agree or not. And I do agree, by the way, that we were never there to provide a pandemic cover, that actually there'll be less going direct, because when this settles down, even a smaller SME customer will surely see there is benefit and need for professional advice that the best brokers provide. Also, the other thing is, in a hard market, which is coming, isn't coming, the pace of it, debate. But if it did come to anything like, I'm old enough to see what it was like post 9/11 and before, then that to me is another thing that pushes to the better brokers who can give quality advice and not get, terms and conditions and a price at the back of a fag packet. So I don't know what your views are on that, Pete.
Yeah, I mean, I couldn't agree more. I mean, I think that this is a great opportunity for brokers to actually show their worth. And actually, I think that this is one area where the regulator could potentially be a broker's friend, because the regulator could, at a stroke, make a statement to say that, look, other than incredibly simple products like car insurance, like travel insurance, or even that there's a debate over it, but other than incredibly simple products, any other insurance products have to be advised. I personally hate the whole concept of anyone allowing customers who do not understand the subject matter to buy products themselves online. I just think it's, yeah, but we're rowing against the tide with that, because of course in every other area of life, yeah, my children just, they wouldn't even dream of not buying something online. It's kind of, that is their only world. That's the only lens through which they see anything. So how the regulator actually gets across the fact that, you know, this is a complicated product and advice has to be given, but allows that to happen online, is probably one of our biggest challenges, I think. Because I think, yeah, the customers will want to deal online, they'll want to try and deal online. And there's a perception, of course, built up over many years that if you shop around online, you will save money. So when people want to save money, that's what they go and do. And if there are solutions online, even if they're crap, and we know they're crap, customers won't know they're crap. And the scary bit is, of course, most SMEs don't have a claim in the 10-year period. You know, I think the average is you have one claim every 10 years in the SME market. So there could be tens of thousands of companies that, in blissful ignorance, go and buy a product that's completely rubbish, is not going to respond, is going to let them down, but they'll never know because they won't have a claim until they do.
What's the capacity going to be behind those products, though? And that's, yeah, and I see those kind of products, which, sorry, Dave, some of it's backed by some of the big names like Aviva, people retailing through kind of the Marks and Spencers products, which are white labeled. And I do, the capacity providers behind that will be the big names which we all deal with, unless there's a paradigm shift in that capacity. So the capacity providers need to help out.
I don't disagree, Richard, and we do, and we have strategic partners, as many insurers do, that we invest in because of the push for growth, and every business is looking for new distribution vehicles. That'll always continue. I hope, Peter, that maybe we can get a blend of technology and online with advice or something in the sale there, partnering up with a broker, maybe. Yeah. It needs some work, but to me, that would be a way of, you can't go back to the old traditional methods because people won't buy it, but a blend of the two, rather than saying it's just press a few buttons and you're covered, because that's going to fail again in the future.
We're partnering with we've been devising a pre-renewal process so that we can actually send clients the link, they click on the link, and then they're guided through the questions that we need to ask them, so that for those clients that actually want to just deal online and want to you know, sit at home and do it themselves, but on each question, as they roll onto the question, you know, a script comes up just basically saying, look, you know, for this bit we need to know this and this is why. And we're also looking at whether we can actually embed videos into this sort of thing, so that when we're actually sending out even basic level SME insurance policies, we just embed a small video from the account exec or from the handler, just to say, Dave, your insurance policy is up. I've attached everything. It's all on the email here. I really want you to check this. I really want you to check that. Can you just come back to me on this? Can you come back to me on that? And look, I still think we ought to talk about cyber, but by all means, if you're concerned about it, pick up the phone. But it's a way of interacting with clients that's, you know, that actually just hopefully achieve that goal of getting the real pertinent information across and not embedding it in a 400-page PDF.
I really like that approach, Peter. I think it seems to hit a very nice blend of kind of modern and traditional at the same time, using the values of an insurance broker and also the technology available at our fingertips.
Well, the idea came to me when I was at I put a car in for a service, and then and you get an email through from the garage. I'm sure some of you have had this as well. You get an email through from the garage, and the mechanic is walking around your car saying, oh, you know, you've got a ding here, you've got a problem there. As you can see, the tread on this tire is a bit rubbish. You know, we ought to change that. We ought to change that. It takes them 20 seconds to do, but you feel as though you're getting a proper personal service, and at least it proves that they did actually put the bloody thing up on the ramp.
Very, very true. Do we need to have a hearts and minds campaign as an industry going forwards post COVID? Did we need it beforehand? But do we need to kind of reach out? What can the ABI do better? What can the FCA do better? What can BIBA do better? I think there's been some kind of negative allegations raised against BIBA for not being proactive enough.
Well, one of the challenges, I think, look, you've got different trade associations that are there to protect the interests of different people. And actually, I personally think there's a big role for the CII in this, because they're probably the only organisation that actually span everyone, and their whole raison d'etre is to further public trust in insurance. So I think the CII should be really front and center of this, because unfortunately the ABI always seem to end up being portrayed as just justifying weasel words in the nicest possible way. That's kind of how they come across to the public, in my view. They're always there at an interview. You see them. So why aren't the insurance companies doing this? And then you just get some, scripted answer about, well, of course, naturally, the insurance company don't pay for this, don't pay for that, don't pay for the other. It just sounds awful to the customers. I think BIBA are there to protect brokers. Customers generally are not interested in us. It's a real. I think the CII are probably the only organisation that I think could stand a chance of pulling it off, but they need to up their game on that PR message.
I do agree with you,
Peter. Sorry, Richard. Just to follow up on that, do you think the CII is strong enough, established enough to be able to do that? I just think that when we look at it and say, when we do it well, and I sit back and go, I work in an industry, and what am I proud of? I think we're there to drive UK PLC, take risk away from entrepreneurs and allow business to thrive. What we find is we let our reputation down, whether it's brokers, insurers, or collectively, time and time again. And we've put in the estate agent, with no disrespect to estate agents, but we're put in that category when, in my opinion, and I know because I've worked in the industry for that long, maybe I'm a bit biased, but aren't we more important to a customer than their lawyers, their solicitors, their accountants, their auditors? Yet we get nothing like the reputation, and you certainly don't, as a broker partner. I don't know. We just need to do something about it.
Yeah. No, I couldn't agree. Look, I mean, there are loads of things. I see some pockets of really good activity. I loved the campaign that Zurich did a couple of years ago when they were, saying that 99% of our clients get paid out and so on. That some of that data, I'd love to see every insurer having a ticker on their website showing, to date this year, we've paid £1.2 billion worth of claims. That things like that. The CII could do a collective ticker, couldn't they, to show that the UK insurance industry paid out this much so far in claims this year. There's loads of stuff they can do, and I think there's loads of stuff they should do. And I think we probably need to give them more guidance on what would have a greatest effect. I don't think their PR quite hits the spot at the moment. They're a bit too focused on exams and internal stuff, and the only external advertising and PR campaigns were all around chartered, and they did big campaigns in the tube and so on. And I'm not quite sure what that's going to do to the general public. It's a really difficult message, but I think it's one where the CII, I think, will probably be incredibly important, and every broker and every underwriter should be trying to think, right, how can we use our own client testimonials? How can we use our own stats to demonstrate our worth to our customer base, accepting that it's never going to be it's never going to be an interesting story to a journalist. I know we've got Claire Rule on the call. I don't know whether Claire, how do we get journalists to write positive stories about what the insurance industry does, and the great stories of solving problems and helping clients through difficult situations? How do we get journalists to actually write those positive news stories?
Claire, are you there?
Claire's on mute. And there you go. Look, case in point.
Hi,
you just can't
sorry.
Hi there, Claire.
I think possibly just communicating these positive news stories to journalists a bit more, having a bit more communication. There's lots of positive news stories out there.
Yeah.
Sorry,
It's tricky.
Peter.
No, I mean it's really tricky. I mean, my experience is we thought we had a breakthrough a year or so ago when managed to get an interview with a business editor from a major national newspaper. We thought this is a great opportunity to talk, and I was on the phone to this journalist for about 3/4 of an hour, and we ended up getting the one negative bit that was raised in the interview was the only bit that made print. And oh God, it's really tough. I could have prattled on for hours about all the positive, great things we'd done, and they picked up on one bit that wasn't great, and then that was the only bit they wrote. That's lesson learned.
Charlotte Gregory's raised a point here around professionalism. Lawyers, accountants are professionals. In insurance, we're an industry. Should there be a move for us to be professional?
Look, one of the big challenges with insurance is that there is such an enormous spectrum of insurance. You know, people talk about insurance, and when I was looking at the McTavish articles recently, and McTavish is talking about one end of insurance, real top end corporate business. But of course, insurance is everything from mobile phone insurance, pet insurance, through household insurance, travel insurance, motor insurance, small SME, small business, commercial, mid-commercial, corporate, massive corporate. It's an enormous spectrum. And I would say at various parts of that spectrum, there is absolutely the need for high quality professional advice. But frankly, consumers at one end of the spectrum, it's not about professionalism. It's about efficiency, speed, quality of product. It's a different set of requirements. When somebody buys a very, very simple household policy, for example, the product has got to be fit for purpose. It's got to deliver. There might be no human interaction between the customer and the product provider. So it's just got to work. So you could call that professionalism, but to be honest, it's not just professionalism. It's just a quality of product. So I think in all of our interactions, where we do actually interact with customers, absolutely professionalism, being qualified, knowing what you're talking about, genuinely specialising in different clients' needs, absolutely vital. But you have to appreciate that insurance is an incredibly broad spectrum, and some parts of it just actually require quality and efficiency.
Thank you, Peter. Moving on to a different subject now. COVID-19 has seen us very much change. We're here on a Zoom call, change our approach to work. What do you think the future looks like in terms of insurance working, and is it going to affect those London-based insurers or the regions as well? Where do you see it going? How did you embrace this? Did you feel a trust issue with your staff, and how have you resolved that?
It's been about. I have to admit, I hold my hands up. Up until this all happened, whenever I got an email or a note from somebody saying, "Oh, I'm working from home today," I thought, "You skiving lazy bastard." When you get back to the office like the rest of us, it's like always in the back of my head, when anyone said they're working from home, I thought that was a euphemism for skiving off. And I've had to sort of eat my words on that, because having now done it myself for months on end, I'm working harder now than I ever worked before. Look, as a company, we've adapted incredibly well. We did a staff survey last week, and some startling facts came out of it. Of our staff, 65% of our staff now want to work more flexibly going forward, sort of a combination of work and working from home and working from the office. 30% of our staff never want to set foot in an office again. They only want to work from home. Only 5% of our staff actually want to go back to the office full time. So imagine how that made me feel. We spend £5 million a year on rent, and only 5% of our staff want to be there. So you think, well, as a business, wow. I mean, it's going to be hugely different. The bits that worry me though are, it's fine for most of us on this call. Once you've learned your trade and you're experienced and you kind of know what you're doing, then there's a lot more confidence in being able to work from home. I do really worry about young brokers, young account handlers, young underwriters that maybe haven't learned everything. They might have only been doing their job for a few years, and they're kind of isolated in their houses, and they're speaking to customers, and are they saying the right things? Are they coming across in the right way? And who's mentoring them? The stuff that would normally be picked up in an office environment. If I heard a young Richard Hodson on the phone making an arse of himself, and I'd be tapping him on the shoulder afterwards saying, "Richard, when you said that, you could have maybe handled that a little bit differently, and maybe got a better outcome." We're not getting that opportunity. So I think that's the bit that we've got to try and figure out how to solve. And for us, I see a world where we'll end up having staff's natural place will be working from home, but that will be maybe 3 days a week. And there'll be 2 days a week where they come in for collaboration days with their teams and for the learning and training and collaboration that we need. So, and for some functions, once people have got to a certain level and they absolutely know what they're doing and their function is very much a processing function, I can see them being more working from home and even less working in the office. And at the junior end of the spectrum, for people coming in, it should be more working in office to get them that level of interaction and experience. But either way, I'm predicting a 50% cut in our rent roll over the next sort of 4 or 5 years, because it will be a different working environment, be a different place.
And Peter,
time to invest in Aston Lark then for
absolutely
your profit returns. So just before you go, Dave, there's a question here from Claire. Do you think there will be more trust in the industry working from home post COVID-19? How do you think this will change office life as we know it? I think you've kind of touched on most of
the trust thing is really interesting, because it's again, being completely honest, I was one of the probably the cynical guys about not trusting the people working from home. But we've now got the technology has come on amazingly. We've got this system, a Power BI suite of tools now, that I can look at any office, any individual, and actually see how many entries they processed on Actress yesterday, last week, last month. We can analyze productivity across offices, across divisions, across regions. And I can tell you, for example, in May, we actually did 5% more activities on Actress in May this year than we did in the corresponding May last year. And we earned 5% less, which kind of says that actually exactly what you think, really, that actually we're all really busy, really working hard, but a lot of it is processing return premiums and reductions in cover rather than necessarily growing stuff. So we've got that visibility, and with that visibility, you can then trust people. Once you actually see that, demonstrably they're doing as much work this year as they were last year, and you see what time they log off in the morning, you can see what time they log off in the night, you can see the calls that they're making, you can see the activities they're getting through. That's plenty of information for us to trust them, but also grant them that flexibility. We've had people say to us, it'd be really helpful if I didn't work between 9 and 11, because that's when my youngster needs my help on school. That's cool, great. So, if you want to log on at 7 and do an hour or so then, or do you want to do an extra bit at the end of the day? Not a problem at all. So it's helping us to be much more flexible. And I think the trust thing is coming through in the numbers.
Good. We had Sam White speak at one of our events earlier this year, very much about diversity and inclusion. And with what's been going on at the moment in trust and the riots and the protests, sorry, riots are the wrong word, the protests going on, diversity and inclusion is something which the market's been, I think, positively pushing for a year or so now. Can we do more? Can the insurance industry be better at this? And what should we be doing?
It's really, I had really interesting conversations yesterday, because we were asked by a journalist about how many of our staff come from a BAME background, and of course, funny enough, as a consolidator, we don't even know specifically that answer, and that's simply because we've acquired 25 companies, and the 25 companies that we've acquired don't necessarily keep those stats. We've got the stats for all of our own joiners, so when new recruits come in, we ask them to complete forms that actually and people can voluntarily disclose their ethnicity and gender and so on. So we've got that for the majority of recruits that have come into Aston Lark, but we haven't got it for the historical acquisitions. Our rough estimate is that only around 5% of our work, no, it's a bit more than that, I think it's 6% of our workforce overall come from a BAME background. So 14% of the UK population come from a BAME background. So there's clearly a gap there just on our own population. Naturally, there'll be some bias around that. We don't have many city centre locations. We're mainly in rural parts of England where the representation of BAME people is lower. So there's an element of that. But it made me think the other day, I have never yet met a black owner or vendor of an insurance broking business. In the last 30 years, I've never met one. And that's pretty damning for the insurance industry overall. So what's going wrong? Why do people from a BAME background demonstrably not see insurance as being a great career home for us? Because actually, I think as employers, looking around the people on this call, I know where a lot of you work, and I know that we are all, as employers, we are fiercely protective to make sure that we are never racist, sexist, we don't discriminate.
Right, let's just move to another question, Peter, which is I've noticed that you've been using a bicycle to get around a bit more.
Absolutely.
And one of the other speakers we had in this year's City Forum was about business and the environment.
Mm-hmm.
What do you think we could do as an industry to be greener, cleaner, better? Is there anything we can help in terms of helping our policy holders, helping our clients from an insurance perspective, or is that something we shouldn't be going down?
No, absolutely. Look, I've already I've got one of our guys working on a plan of how we can become carbon neutral as a broker. I think it's something that we could do, and so I've got somebody working on that plan. Beaver, I know, have come up with a green initiative to try and help brokers to become carbon neutral. So look, it's definitely something that we should be doing. We get asked about it on some of our big tenders nowadays when we're going after large corporates. We get asked for our ESG credentials, and it's part of what we should be doing. And we talked earlier on about the reputation of the insurance industry. Well, that's a great way that we something that we can easily do to actually enhance our reputation. So yeah, I'm all for it, and we're piloting. We're doing the old the bike for work allowance and all those sorts of things. And of course, by working from home, we'll be helping the environment somewhat more anyway. You're on mute, Richard.
Dave, question for you as a representative of a big insurer at Aviva. What's Aviva doing to help with kind of being greener?
God, thanks, Richard. I'm not the speaker here, but yeah, so I'm not prepared for this, but fine. Our CEO, Maurice, has been quite public in terms of his commitment and Aviva's commitment globally to the green agenda and climate change specifically. He actually spoke at the UN towards the end of last year about our industry and the role of larger corporates and larger companies. So it's heavily on our agenda in terms of the approach that we take to support the environment. We do things that I'm sure a number of other insurers do in terms of support for staff on buying and acquiring bicycles and the like, and encouraging, car sharing if you're traveling to offices, if that ever comes back, and the like. So it is very much a focus, and it's led from the top. The bit that I think we still need to work on as an industry, and Aviva's not immune to that, is what's our credentials on green products? How do we underwrite, and will we assess that in our pricing approach for particular industries, particular segments that are more heavily green? We took a stand, as I think other insurers did, on the coal industry, for example, which clearly not prevalent in the UK, but is in the States and other parts of the globe, and we don't and won't put capacity down and get involved in that. So that's kind of a first stage. But I think there's a lot more that we can do and other insurers can do. But it's very much an agenda from Maurice, our CEO, downwards.
Richard, I was just going to ask, did you actually get the end of my? I was talking about the fact that there is clearly, and I don't know whether anyone's got any views on this. What are we doing wrong as an industry to not get applicants from BAME background going for top jobs in the insurance profession? So I don't know whether anyone actually heard any of that.
Well, what are your opinions on that, Peter? How do we attract the city? I've got a personal opinion on this, which is we sit in London, at the East End of London, next to huge BAME communities. When Oval was being acquired by Gallagher's, we organised a cricket game to integrate the two teams at the HAC. In there was Talbot were playing, and we played against the Tower Hamlets Academy. And I spoke to a lot of the young kids. There were all these young Bangladeshi origin children smashing me to all parts of the ground. But they're all kind of at that age about to start their careers. And I said, have you ever thought about insurance? And these are the kids who were sitting on our doorstep. None of them wanted to come into insurance because they had other ideas. They wanted to be accountants, they wanted to be doctors, they wanted to be lawyers. Most of them wanted to be bankers because they thought that's where the money was. So what do we do? Do we need to change our opinion? Do we need more apprenticeships? How do we do it?
Yeah, well, I think all of the above. Look, you've got to get more. We've got to get more people into the system, and it's very much like the. There are also some. I think there are some interesting psychological issues around this, though. But there's the whole challenge around subconscious bias, about the fact that people are just naturally biased when they're interviewing people, and we haven't done enough as an industry, as a profession, to really train people up on this, to understand that by starting an interview by talking about football, you are potentially committing a sort of an act of subconscious bias against that person if they've got no interest in the subject matter. And we have to learn to identify with the people that we want that we want to come and work in our organisation. It's going to take an awful lot of effort, a lot of time and trouble to try and actually understand what it is we're doing wrong. But I just think if there's been one good outcome from the whole BLM movement, then it's made quite a lot of people think about, well, what are we doing and why are we underrepresented, and then what should we be doing going forward. And I think integration from schooling, from careers advice, from just encouraging people from those backgrounds to come into insurance. Once we get more people from those backgrounds actually in the hopper, then we stand a fighting chance of getting them promoted and actually letting them believe that aspirationally they can go and take on the top jobs in this profession, because they absolutely can. And I think insurance is one of the very best industries and professions. I think we're exemplars when it comes to actually looking after staff and treating people properly. I think generally we do incredibly well, but for some reason it hasn't filtered through to some parts of the community.
Do you think it's more prevalent in the city, this being the City Forum, than it is in the regions?
I think the city is noticeably devoid of BAME people in our profession. I mean, how many times I remember going to a big dinner at one of the with one of the insurers, and I looked around the room and there must have been 200 people there, and I would say 185 were male, white, middle class, and there were literally 10 or so women, and you could count the number of BAME people in that room of 200 on less than one. It was like, I think there were 2 people there from a BAME background out of 200 or so senior individuals in the insurance industry. So we're clearly doing something wrong, and this should be a wake-up call for us to try and get this sorted, and as a minimum target, be at least representative of the population that we serve.
Matt Waters,
sorry, can I just jump in? Hi, Peter.
Hi,
hello. It's interesting. When I started in insurance 18 years ago, it was a similar conversation about women in the industry, and I was generally the only female at a young age in the room when I first started. Obviously that percentage has changed, but even just looking on this call today, you can see people's faces. It's quite plain. It still sometimes feels like there's a long way to go in that respect, but certainly on the other bit as well. So it kind of feels like almost the same journey, just sort of 18, 20 years down the line from the sort of female in the industry part.
It's really interesting. I think you're absolutely right.
I think I would add a couple of points, and I speak as somebody who, on behalf of the CII, has been around a number of schools talking about careers within insurance. The one thing that the industry doesn't do at a school level is promote itself as an industry, and I think one of the problems, it's already been commented on, from the average person coming through the education system, they look at being a lawyer as a profession, or an accountant as being a profession, but the industry doesn't promote itself in that way. So, as I say, when I go to the schools and start talking about or presenting at some of the careers fairs, those industries that I just mentioned, I mean, vocational industries, doctors, teachers, whatever, are slightly different to this. But in terms of going into a profession, it's quite hard pushing insurance as an interesting career to school children. They just don't see it as something that would, they don't understand. Because everybody thinks about, and no disrespect to anybody who's in these areas, but they think about the direct line red telephone. They don't think about you know, everything else that's actually hugely fascinating about the sector. And then the second point I would add around just trying to bring in some of the diversity to the insurance industry is, over the years, we've all seen it, there's been a move away from bringing in raw kind of, you know, GCSE or A-level people and training them up. I mean, there's been a swing back towards A-level people recently. But and I speak as a recruiter predominantly for London, to be fair, not the regions. We very rarely are asked to find anybody, you know, as a raw trainee, and you would expect that because obviously we charge a fee. But once you start looking for people with a couple of years' experience, well, if the industry hasn't brought those people in the first place, then you can't move them around. And so once you get to 5, 7, 10 years experience, that's why we see what we see.
Yeah, that's a good point, Matthew. I mean, I do think though that with insurance, there are, you know, we employ people just in Aston Lark. We employ people who do nothing all day other than social media promotions. Yeah, we employ people who do nothing but, you know, direct marketing. We employ people who are technical claims specialists, and all they get involved with is really interesting, difficult claims. You know, we have sales staff, we have people there are so many different jobs, and yet, but they're just not promoted. And it does seem amazing that actually we don't get, you know, the world's wife beating apart to our door.
Sam,
and
sorry to interrupt you, Matt. Gosh, the time. Sam P, you've got a question.
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yeah.
I was just going to plug a charity called The Brokerage. Used to be called the Brokerage City Link. They do amazing work bringing school kids into city offices, allowing them to interview staff on how did you end up in insurance, what car do you drive, how much could I earn? No, but seriously, it is an amazing charity that does a lot of work to raise the aspirations of kids that can see the city but don't actually understand that it is different to the direct lines of this world. And I take them into my office and I show them a world map with pins in showing where all our clients are, and talk to them about, you know, the travel that you can do as a broker or as an underwriter even, and to see their little faces lit up is a real treat. So I would encourage anybody that's interested to look up The Brokerage and get in touch with them.
Do you want to give me a link to that, and we'll put it on the City Forum LinkedIn.
Yeah, I'll put it on the chat for you.
Yannick's got a question here, that should we have mandatory reporting of BAME numbers as we do for gender numbers?
I mean, look, I think that's probably an inevitability now. I mean, it was interesting, yeah, being asked the question and realising actually we don't even actually collate the data. Yeah, in a way, it's a good thing and a bad thing. You know, it shows that as a business we're kind of blind to it, but how are we going to know whether we're making progression unless we know where we're starting from and what we're aiming for? So yeah, I think it's probably inevitable. You know, we now do that as far as gender is concerned, but we're not doing it currently for BAME for existing staff. But now we will address that now.
I'm conscious of time. Has anybody got any further questions for Peter? No, well, Peter, thank you incredibly for your time today, taking time out of your incredibly busy schedule to join us today. I think if I could take anything from this, is that we all need to be better, nicer, friendlier to everybody. I also think it's our responsibility as individuals to call out bad behaviour. Yeah. Too many of us tend to hide our head when we see behaviour which is unacceptable. That's not just racism, but it's racism, sexism, bullying, and behaviour unbecoming to the industry should always be called out by individuals. I think it's up to us to have the confidence and be brave enough to call it out. So I think that's very important. But I hope everybody remains safe, and I look forward to seeing you all again soon on our next virtual catch-up.
Thanks very much. Thanks, Richard. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, Peter.
Thanks, Ed. Cheerio.